Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome, Trailblazers. This is the Winter 20 Developer Readiness Live webinar, and I want to welcome you all here today. We're going to cover a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about the Lightning Message Service, Flow for developers, and this thing called Real-Time Event Monitoring with Shield. But before we get into that, we've got this really important thing that we have to do. It's everyone's favorite slide. Everyone sing with me now. It's the forward-looking statement slide. Now, the forward-looking statement slide is here to remind you to make your purchasing decisions based on publicly and generally available services and products from Salesforce. And with that extremely interesting stuff out of the way, let's switch over to introducing our panelists. So my name's Kevin Poorman, and I've been coding on the Salesforce platform since API 11. And since we're going into API 47, that feels like it makes me feel old. If it makes me feel old, I'll put it that way. So if I had a superpower, though, I think my superpower would be the ability to write code that never has any bugs. Right? How about you, Grace?
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace, and I'm excited to be joining you from the Lightning Platform team. If I had a superpower, I would pick telekinesis, so that with my mind, I can help you make that transition from classic to Lightning experience. On to you, Tim.
Thanks, Grace. I'm going to let you finish, but Kevin, I want to say you are looking as vibrant and as young as the day we met. Now, my name is Tim, and I am thrilled to be here to talk about some of the many improvements we on the Salesforce Lightning Flow team have made over the last release and will continue making in the future to make app development on Lightning Platform a breeze. Now, if I were to have a superpower, it would have to be some sort of combination of kindness, empathy, and customer success. The three values that I try to live every day, both at work and at home. To you, Badri.
Thanks, Tim. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Friday. I'm super excited to be here to talk about the second generation of event monitoring called real-time event monitoring. I've been with Salesforce for about 10 years now, and I'm super excited to be attending my 10th Dreamforce. If I were to have a superpower, that would be to have an awesome birthday, and it's today.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And my birthday wish would be to be able to talk to my daughter in a better and efficient way.
Aw. Well, that's the panelists today. Let's dive into getting some feedback from you. We are on social at Salesforce Devs on Twitter and at Salesforce Devs on Facebook, etc. So you can tune in, give us feedback, give us questions, ask us anything. And with that, we're going to dive into a few slides that I like to consider the sort of appetizer round of what we're going to be talking about today. So with that, let's talk about our good friends, the Aura UI Namespace components. Now, they've served us well, but they are retiring, and we wanted to give you a heads up that we're going to have a retirement party for them here at the Summer 21 release, so a couple of years from now. But with the Winter 20 release, we're letting you know that they are retiring, and that we've got a path forward for you. There's a almost one-to-one correspondence between the UI namespace and the Lightning namespace. So if you had a UI button, you can have a Lightning button now, and you can find all about the mapping between UI and Lightning components in the namespace documentation there, sforce.co/dpl-namespace. That's the Aura components. They're retiring. We've also got this new feature that allows us to actually use CSS in a reusable way. So one of the things that I've always had a difficulty with is if I have a CSS style that is in two components, I have to duplicate that CSS in both components. And inevitably, when I have a CSS issue, I have to go fix it in more than one component. So with this release, we've got a fix for that. And what you can do is create a component that contains nothing but your CSS file. So a Lightning Web component just has the CSS file in it. And then in any other component, in that component's CSS file, you can import it. So if you look at these two code snippets we've got going on here, on the left, we've got a CSS file that defines the H1 style. And on the right, we've got a different component, my component. And in that my component's CSS file, we're importing the CSS library.css from the other component. And once we've done that, we can use that H1 style as if we had natively defined it there in our myComponent.css. This is amazing. It's pretty simple to use. I'm really looking forward to it. And now we actually have CSS that we can reuse across our components. I'm really excited about that. We've also got some changes to the navigation mix-in for Lightning Web Components. And the thing that we get here is the ability to navigate and have a button that navigates from one app to another. So we've always had the ability to go in and go from one page to another, or go to a record page, etc. But now if we're in a custom app for our company, we can also say, okay, click this link and go directly to a list of opportunities, or the opportunities, or some part of the sales app as if we'd like. And we've got two demos, two code snippets here for that. The first one is going to take us to a particular page in an app. And if we click on that one, it's going to take us to, say, a record detail page in the sales app. And on the other one, we've got just going to a different whole app. We'll go straight to the home screen of that app. And in that case, we're going to go, and we're demonstrating the app not by the name, but by the ID. You can do either one of them. The app target can be the name or the ID. So in this case, we would go to the service app in this org. So with that, we can create those buttons, go straight to a particular page or a particular app, really simply and quickly, make navigation a whole lot simpler as we build our apps, and trying to go back and forth between functionality in a custom app and standard apps. And this is another one that I think is really kind of cool. Now that when a prediction is made by Einstein, so like an Einstein prediction field or something like that, when that's been populated, additional records are being created by the Einstein platform, and they populate those records with insights about why that and how that prediction was made. And so you can also subscribe to events that are published by that prediction, so that you can do things like create a trigger, so that when a prediction is made on this AI prediction event, you can turn around and say, okay, I want to look at the insights fields and records that have been created associated with this prediction and make further choices. So you might turn around and say, all right, well, this opportunity is predicted as only marginally likely to close. So what can we do to fix that? We've made the prediction, it's only marginally likely. Let's turn around and look at if we can add other people to the opportunity team, say product specialists or people who have relationships with the company already, to try and increase the chances of that opportunity closing. I think this is going to be a really important tool in our AI and Einstein bucket. And this is, I think, my favorite Winter 20 for developers feature. It's called Metadata Component Dependencies. Now, as we try and work towards breaking our orgs up, especially larger orgs, into multiple packages, one of the things that's hard to do is figuring out where you can draw those package boundaries, because it's hard to know what depends on what. So with metadata component dependencies, you can turn around and write a SOQL query, execute that SOQL query via the tooling API, and what you get back is a list of up to 2,000 rows showing what other metadata depends on the metadata you passed in. And that was a mouthful, so let me try that again. If you turn around and you pass in the SOQL query and you say, what depends on this field, what you'll get back is a list of objects and metadata objects that depend on that field. So for instance, if you had an account lifespan field, you might find that the report for the account time report depends on that account lifetime field. Likewise, and perhaps more interesting to me, is the ability to execute this on classes and objects. So I can turn around and say, I want to see everything that depends on my account wrapper class. And I can start to map out and sort of illustrate and diagram on a whiteboard where my package boundaries might be. And so I think these are really powerful and are really, really exciting. There are some great limitations. You'll get to learn more all about them in our Learn More campaign. So with that little bit of a teaser and of little itty-bitty things coming from our Winter 20 release, let's hand it over to Grace to teach us all about the Lightning Message Service.
Awesome. That was some pretty awesome stuff that you mentioned there, Kevin. So hi, everyone. I'm Grace, and as I mentioned, I'm joining from the Lightning Platform team. My team is responsible for Visualforce. And I know that there's a ton of Visualforce fans out there, so I hope that you're all really, really excited to hear what we have to share with you today. Today, I'm going to first talk about some features that are already available for Visualforce and Lightning Experience. And then we'll spend the core of today talking about the new service that we are bringing in the Winter 20 release. For my Aura and LWC developers out there, stay tuned because this service is going to benefit you as well. I mentioned in my superpower that I really wanted to be able to help you move from Classic into Lightning. And when we looked at Visualforce, we wanted to make that easy for you in your Visualforce pages. One of the biggest differences is visually that Classic and Lightning look different. We wanted to make it so easy for you to style your Visualforce page so that when you're in Lightning, you have the Lightning look and feel, but when you're in Classic, you maintain that Classic look and feel. We wanted this to be super easy, so we created this Lightning Style Sheets, where all you have to do is add Lightning Style Sheets equals true to your Visualforce page, and it will handle styling that page and the most commonly used Visualforce components. We also wanted to help you understand just how your Visualforce pages are being used in your org. So we created a simple and handy tool that scans your org and gives you a really useful high-level overview of those pages and important information about the pages. At a high level, you can see how many views your pages are getting, where those pages are being used, and even profiles that are accessing those pages. But being developers, it gives you even more useful information. As we're scanning your pages, we detect if there's any potential little incompatibilities with Lightning experience, and we give you the exact line of code where we detected that. We also make it super easy for you to then drill directly into your code so that you can make the tweaks that you need to get that page working great in Lightning. We even took it one step further, and we added the ability to do that auto styling I mentioned earlier within this tool itself, so that just with one click, no code required, you can apply Lightning Style Sheets to your Visualforce page. All of this is available in a suite of tools that we provide to you in the Transition Assistant, and specifically this tool can be found in the Lightning Configuration Converter. Lastly, we created a new component specifically for Visualforce in Lightning Experience. This is called Live Controller, and it's a component that when you add it to your Visualforce page in Lightning, it makes sure that that page is always updated to show you the latest record data. So for example, in Lightning, maybe you're making a change from a Lightning component, or you're making a change from an Apex trigger or from an API, and the underlying record has been changed. Well, Live Controller, when you add it to your page, it detects that the underlying record has been changed, and it will automatically re-render your Visualforce page to display you the latest information. You don't have to go in and refresh the page. It will detect that, and it will make sure that you are up to date. Those are some cool features already available, but let's get to the core of today, which is we're super happy to introduce now, with the Winter 20 release, Lightning Message Service. And as you can probably guess, the message service is all about communication. So previously, if you wanted to communicate between different components in Lightning Experience, you would have to write your own custom JavaScript to handle that passing of the messages. Well, we took a step back and we looked at it. We want you to be thinking about the data that you want to pass and all the cool applications you can build with your LWC, Aura, and Visualforce components in Lightning Experience. We don't want you to be worrying about how to send that data. So what we've done is we've built a native client-side communication framework specifically for Lightning Experience, where we've simplified the sending of data so that now you can send complex data across the DOM between your LWC, Aura, and Visualforce components. We've also made it so that it works between your main Lightning page and your utility bar. So for example, maybe I have a product list component on my main page, and I have a shopping cart component in my utility bar. As I'm adding products to my shopping cart, I can now use the message service to communicate between the two to make sure that my overall inventory is up to date. All of this feature is available in the Winter 20 release, and it's available on all Developer Edition and Sandbox orgs. So the way that we built the message service is we wanted to make sure that it was simple for you to get started to use. And at the heart of the message service are the Lightning message channels. These are really the backbone of the message service APIs. We wanted to keep it simple for you, so we chose to build it on metadata, which provides us with a number of benefits. First, it means that there's one place where you can define your message channels and then use them across all of your UI components. Metadata also provides referential integrity enforcement between your message channels and the code that consumes them. Metadata also provides support for packaging. When creating a message channel, we wanted to make sure that it was super simple and lightweight for you to get started. To keep it simple, we made it so that you actually only have to provide just one required field when you're creating a new message channel. Don't worry, later when we hop into the demo and the code, I'll show you just how easy it is to get these up and running. And by default, we've made it so that message channels are namespace isolated. But we know that you may want to expose communication to components in other namespaces, so we made this an option that you can choose. Lastly, as I've spoken about, we really want you to be focused on the data you want to send, not on how you send that data. And just as we made Lightning message channels easy to set up and configure, we made it super easy for you to send and receive messages using the API. We've designed it so that the user interface feels natural for developers familiar with each of our UI frameworks. We've also made it so that messages themselves are really flexible. They're serializable JSON objects, and you can actually customize the message contents at the time of publish. Don't worry if that doesn't quite make sense yet. When I go into my demo, I'll show you exactly what that means and how flexible it is. And lastly, we support global messaging, which means that if you're a console user and you have multiple Lightning Console tabs open, when you publish a message, all components that are subscribed on any of the tabs, whether they're currently visible or not, will receive the messages and be able to respond to them. We know that that's not always the use case you're going for, so in the future, we are looking at an ability where you can choose to publish only to components in the active visible window. So I promised you demos twice now. Let's hop over to the demo, and I'll show you just how easy it is to use the Lightning Message Service. Here I have a simple app where I've created LWC, Aura, and Visualforce components, and I've put them on the main Lightning page as well as the utility bar. I have a couple of fields that I show. The first is the message channel that they're subscribed to, and the second is whether or not they're currently subscribed. Let's just try publishing a message. Notice that if I publish a message from the main Lightning page, that message is received by all subscribed components on the main Lightning page as well as the utility bar. If I then publish back from the utility bar, again, it passes back to the main Lightning page. Let's try publishing from my LWC component. Aha! So notice this time that my message actually contained a special extra line. Even though my LWC component is subscribed to the same message channel, I was able to add this extra line. And this goes back to the customizability of the messages themselves that I was referring to. We make it super easy for you to send whatever you need to send in the payload. Let's look at the code and see how we made this happen. For those of you who may not be familiar with this interface, I'm using Visual Studio Code with the Salesforce CLI. I've got my Explorer on the left side and my open files on the right. Let's walk through all the steps that we took to get these message channels set up. I mentioned that message channel is built on metadata. One of the other benefits of that is that you work with them just the same way that you work with any other metadata. We've added a new type, Lightning Message Channel, and if you add this to your package.xml, you can simply do a force source retrieve and pull those message channels back from your org. They will all be contained in the message channels folder. Next, let's see how I set up my message channel. Now, don't be too worried. I know that there's a lot of text here, but I made a promise that we only have one required field, and that is still true. The only field that you need to provide is the master label. But being awesome Salesforce developers, you're obviously all really good at documentation and making sure that your customers know what kinds of messages are going to be sent on this channel. So we wanted to help you with that. We include optional fields for you to put a description where you can add more information about the message channel, and also separate Lightning fields, message fields, where you can add specific information about the fields that you're going to pass. Now, when I went into my demo, you saw that at time of publish, I can actually add additional fields to the payload. So just remember that this is mostly used for documentation, but as you're looking to consume messages, make sure that you do check the payload and the contents and ensure that that matches what you're expecting to receive. I mentioned by default that message channels are namespace isolated. If you want to maintain that, simply move forward. But if you want to expose communications to components in different namespaces, do go in and set the isExposed equal to true. All right, now let's look at how we consume the message channel. Here I have a super simple LWC component, really simple. I've created a lightning card-based component, and I've added a few lightning button components for subscribe, unsubscribe, and publish, and I defined their on-click methods in my JavaScript. In the JavaScript, all I need to do is import the message service APIs and import the channel that I want to publish on as a scoped module. Within my default class, the first thing I need to do is make sure that I set the context by calling createMessageContext. Now, context is super important, and it's going to tell me some additional information about what's surrounding my component. This will kind of play into that future capability I hinted at earlier, where you can publish to only components that are active and visible. That functionality isn't yet available today, so for today, just know that context is something that you do need to set because you do need to pass that in to the publish and subscribe APIs. We also define our subscription object, which we set in our subscribe method. To subscribe, I kept it really simple. I basically just check if I'm already subscribed, and if not, I call the message service subscribe method and I pass in the context, channel, and method I want to invoke when messages flow on that channel. To unsubscribe, I simply pass that subscription object back into the message service unsubscribe method. And lastly, to publish, all I do is I create my message, put in whatever content I want to send, and I pass that into the message service publish method along with the context and the channel to publish on. Lastly, generally as good practice, we do want to make sure that we release message context when the component is removed from the DOM. So make sure that you call release message context within disconnected callback. So with that, I'll end my demo for today. I hope you're all super excited about the Lightning Message Service and what it can unlock for you as you think about using your Visualforce, Aura, and LWC components together in Lightning Experience. Back to you, Kevin.
That was really interesting. I remember when I first started learning about Lightning Web Components, wrapping my mind around Aura to LWC communication through PubSub, and this seems like it's going to be a lot easier.
Definitely. That was the hope. Like I mentioned, we wanted to take that handling of message sending and build it into the framework so that you don't have to write custom JavaScript or import the PubSub library.
That's very cool. We have some questions from the community about it. One of them, the questions is, why was the Aura component missing the subscribe and unsubscribe options?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad that you caught that. One thing that I mentioned is that we wanted it to be natural for developers of each of our UI frameworks. And one thing that we found is that our Aura developers do prefer to use the declarative method of subscribing and unsubscribing. So we took that approach when we defined the APIs for Aura in Lightning Message Service.
So this is a when in Rome type thing.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Makes sense. Where can people find the Lightning Experience Configuration Converter? That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. But it's super helpful, and there's a lot of functionality baked into the tool, so it's a worthy mouthful. The Lightning Experience Configuration Converter is part of a suite of tools that I mentioned in the Transition Assistant, which if you go into Setup and search, you can find the Transition Assistant, or you can simply go to your favorite search engine of choice and type in Lightning Configuration Converter. It should be the top hit.
Okay, that's great. Another question's come up about the message channel metadata. I think there's a little confusion as to whether or not the fields are all going to be enforced at runtime. So if you create a message and it's missing a field, what happens?
Good question. Always good to check. So message channels, as I mentioned, there's only one required field, and all the other fields are optional more for documentation. So at runtime, you can actually choose to customize whatever payload that you want to send, and it is okay.
Okay, all right. Will the ability to publish to visible components be supported in all the UI technologies?
Definitely. They're all first-class citizens.
Okay, that's cool. What about using message channels in the developer console? Can we create them in the developer console?
Unfortunately, we don't support creating message channels in the developer console, but Visual Studio Code with the Salesforce CLI is super great and useful, and so I recommend that you use that.
Okay. And you touched on it a little bit with the message context, but could you say a little bit more about that? What is the purpose of the message context? What might we be doing with it in the future?
So the message context, as I mentioned, it gives you a lot of good information about what is surrounding your component. And one of the use cases I mentioned is that, say you're a Lightning Console user, you've got a lot of tabs open, and some of them are a lot of tabs open in the background. Well, maybe you don't want a message to actually be published to all of those tabs and all listeners that might be hiding out on those tabs. Maybe you only want to publish to the tab that you are currently working on. Well, that's what context is going to support when we enable that when we enable support for visible messages, passing messages to visible components in a future release.
Okay, that's really cool. I hadn't thought about having multiple tabs open. What that would, I could just imagine the notification fatigue that would come from having messages pop up all over the place there.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to call out is that this is specifically for Lightning Console users who might have multiple console tabs.
Gotcha. Okay, all right. One of the questions that's come in is about the disconnected callback method in the Lightning Web Component code sample. Do we need to manually call and release the message context when we're done with it? What is that about? How does that work?
You do need to manually call that right now. You simply call the release message context within disconnected callback, and we'll handle releasing all the context when that component is removed from the DOM. Right now in this release, you do need to manually call that, but in the future, we will support kind of automatic cleanup of these listeners, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so it sounds super easy to use, super powerful, and it sounds like it's only going to get better.
Definitely.
All right. Well, with that, Grace, thank you very much. Let's switch over to Tim. Tim's going to school us all on Flow.
Thanks, Kevin. That was a great demo. So anyways, as I mentioned at the beginning of this cast, in Flow, we are driven to make process-driven application development a breeze on platform. And this means not just making it easier to develop, but also hopefully giving you options to architect the way you develop applications so that you can make your work reusable, leverageable by other people, and thus increase the velocity that you can deliver at across the board. And so as I go through the features today and I go through the demo, keep in mind, how can you use this thing to get creative? And let us know. So let's get started. So the first thing I am actually very excited to talk about is we have brought scheduled flows to platform. And so this is your declarative version of scheduled Apex classes. And what you can do is you can now use auto-launched flows and run them on a daily or a weekly schedule. The next thing you can do is you can set them to run against a batch or a population of records and run them against that entire batch at once. And so this scheduled flow feature, we're going to talk about it more, I believe, next week in the platform webinar, but it is deeply integrated into platform. So what that means is when you create and you activate a scheduled flow, you can find it under scheduled flows in setup. And there's a nice new log line for you in the Apex debug logs on the screen, where you can basically debug this scheduled flow as you try it out and test it. Of course, one of the important things when you're developing on platform is to be conscientious of the limits that you need to design against. And so scheduled flows actually have their own set of limits that are distinct from the scheduled Apex limits. They're actually very similar, but they count in their own bucket. And so on the screen, you can see scheduled flow limits. You can have a total of the larger of either 250,000 or 200 times the number of user licenses in your org, number of executions in the last 24 hours. This is the same limit as Apex, except we're counting them separately, which is delightful. Scheduled flows are auto-launched flows, and so they are also subject to the same limits that are on auto-launched flows. Namely, you can have up to 2,000 active auto-launched flows at any time in your org, and up to 4,000 total auto-launched flows, active or inactive, in your org. We hope this gives you a way to automate your automation, or rather set up a schedule with just a few clicks and decouple some of the business logic from the technical concerns. Keep in mind that auto-launched flows can not only perform basic logic and CRUD, but auto-launched flows integrate natively with Apex invocable actions. And so by coding your Apex in a way that is very extensible and consumable by flow via invocable actions, you can actually achieve many of the same outcomes that you can using scheduled Apex, but use this declarative layer to make it accessible to more people in your org to modify. The next thing that I'm thrilled to talk about, and I'm actually going to be spending most of the demo on, is the improvements that we have made to screen flows. So, many of you out there, actually let's do a raise of hands. How many out there know that you can use Flow to create and compose engaging customer experiences with UIs? I'm in a studio, so there's nobody here, but I'm going to assume that many of you behind the screens probably didn't know that. So yes, yes, yes indeed, you can use Flow to create engaging, process-driven visual applications. And in this release, you can now bring and expose the LWCs that you code directly into Flow without having to write a single extra line of code. As you'll see in the demo today, I actually create an LWC and I bring it into Flow and I put it on a Flow screen side by side with an Aura component and a standard Flow component without having to write a single line of code. Wonderful. The next big thing, conditional visibility. This is something I know all of you are very eager, have been asking for years, and it's here. You can now set the visibility on and off for components inside of the screens that you put in your flows based on state of the flow, based on input that the user provides. And again, you don't have to write code to do that, and you can make it configurable by people who don't write code. We're actually going to touch on this in deeper detail in about an hour with Shannon Hale in the admin developer preview, so stay tuned if you want to learn about that feature. The final one is the new record lookup component. You'll see that in today's demo, but this is just one of the ever-growing set of standard flow components that you can bring into your flow screens. You don't have to code them. We own them, we maintain them, and we make sure they work for you. So you can just use those things and not have to worry. We're also committed to making integration much easier when you're building applications. And the way we do that is using what we call an Apex-defined data type. We'll dive into this into the demo, but the idea is you can represent any web object on the internet as an Apex class. And once you expose that Apex class to Flow, you can start pulling those Apex class or those web objects into Flow directly so that you can perform business logic, you can manipulate those objects, and you can also render those objects inside of screens. This is really nice because this hopefully opens up a lot of options for you to decouple integration concerns from other concerns, from business concerns, from presentation concerns. You can decouple those concerns, and every time you want to make an improvement in one of those areas, you don't have to worry about messing around with every other area. We hope this allows you to develop faster and with fewer dependencies. Specifically, in this release, we've added a number of collection operators. That is, we are allowing you to have an easier time working with sets of web objects inside of Flow. And so we'll demo that. Finally, because we just debuted support for LWC inside of Flow screens, you can pass these directly from Flow into an LWC for consumption. And that is exciting. So let's jump right into the demo. I like to start every demo with a story about a customer. And so we're going to use a fictitious customer today. We're going to call them Bright Shop. Because they are a bright-minded shop. And so this Bright Shop has an online storefront, and they have now tasked you with creating a shopping cart amendment application. It's going to be a very simple application that fetches a user's shopping cart from a back-end system sitting outside of Salesforce, pulls that shopping cart into the Salesforce app, and allows the user to amend the shopping cart, amend it more, and finally submit the amendment for finalization. This entire demo is actually going to be real. And so we've chosen to represent our web service on the outside actually using MuleSoft. The nice thing about MuleSoft is no matter how many web services you have, with how many canonical object models. MuleSoft allows you to converge on a single canonical object model for your web objects. And so we've done that here. And so this is actually a live query that we're performing against a MuleSoft endpoint that returns to us a canonical shopping cart of items for a particular user. And you can see here, there's a number of fields on that shopping cart, including the item's GUID, like a unique ID for that item, the item's label, its price, the number of that item in the shopping cart, the type of that item, and the category of that item. And this is a web object that we're going to bring into Salesforce using an Apex type. Now let's go ahead and just dive right into the experience that we want to build out, and then we'll show you how we built that with less than 100 lines of custom code. So the first thing that you can see is there's a really nice sort of stage indicator, which we'll dive into later, but there's a lookup component. Grace, why don't you give me a customer that you would like me to look up?
Can we do Mystique?
Mystique. I wasn't expecting that, so there is no Mystique in this org, unfortunately. But why don't we go ahead and use George Edelstein?
Close enough.
Close enough to Mystique. Okay, so so as you can see on the right, we're running in debug mode, so you can actually see the data flow behind the scenes. And you can see here that we've done an integration with an Apex invocable action that fetches back that same response from that MuleSoft endpoint into Flow. And it casts it into a collection of those Apex types, and then it feeds it into a Lightning Web component data table here on the left. Note that the requirements of the use case were that the cart can be amended by the user. And so in particular, we have specified that the user can change the number of items in the cart. And until they are done changing the cart, that is, until they proceed through this phase without making a change to the number of items in the cart, they are stuck in the update cart phase. Now let's assume that the user is now done amending their cart and they move on and they want to continue. They're brought forward to the confirm cart phase, where the final column becomes uneditable. And finally, they confirm the order for submission. Now, this entire experience was built in Flow with integrations to Aura, to LWC, and to Apex, but I did that all in less than 100 lines of custom code. So let's jump right in. This is the design time experience for Flow Builder. It is really fast, but let's just jump right in. What you can see here at the top are the 4 blue elements, are the 4 screens and the 4 stages that we saw in the application experience. The very first screen, if you recall, was simply a set of stages at the top and a lookup component. This is the new standard Flow screen lookup component that you get in your org once the release rolls out. That's quite simple. The next thing that you can see here is the Apex action, where we have left it to Apex to fetch the shopping cart that is sitting in the external web service and bring it into Flow for us. How do we do that? We did that by creating, firstly, a representation of that web object inside of Apex called an Apex type. And so what you can see here is I've actually taken a shortcut, which is I've taken this JSON representation inside of Postman, and I've used my favorite website, JSON to Apex, to create a class that represents that Apex, that JSON web object as an Apex class. The next thing that I did was I made around 7 changes to this class. I've tagged all the properties as @or-enabled. This exposes that class to Flow. And finally, I've done the thing that every good developer does when they create a new object. I've created a new equals method for it. And this basically makes sure that when I compare instances of this object to other instances, the equals method works. Everything else in here is actually automatically generated by that web service. So I literally, did like maybe 10 lines of code to represent that web object as an Apex type object which Flow can consume. The next thing I did was I created that Apex action, and you can look at it right now, it's 20 lines, to fetch the web object from that MuleSoft endpoint, bring it into Salesforce, cast it into that collection of Apex types, and then Flow calls that action to pull those items into Flow. So as you can see here, an invocable action by annotating a method with the @invocable method annotation and making the method bulk safe. So you can see it takes in a list of strings and returns a list of shopping cart objects. I've exposed it to Flow as an Apex action right here. The next thing that I do is a very simple named callout, leveraging the named credentials secret storage functionality on platform. so I don't have to put my password into Apex code. I perform the request. I retrieve that list of items as a JSON string. Then I parse it into this list of cart item Apex types. Now inside of Flow, I've actually created that cart item Apex defined collection variable. And you can see here, its a data type is Apex defined. I've checked the box to denote that this is a collection. And I've chosen my Apex class that I've exposed to Flow. The next thing that happens is I feed that into my screen. This is my favorite screen because this screen actually combines an Aura component. This is the stage indicator component. This is actually a free component that you can find in our developer nodes at Salesforce. Then I've combined that with a standard Flow screen component. In this case, it is simply a rich text field, display text field. And finally, a Lightning Web component that I've exposed to Flow, all in the same screen without having to worry about wrapping code or writing any additional lines. So let's dive into that LWC. That LWC, I've exposed it to Flow, and it's very easy to expose an LWC to Flow. So here's my LWC. It's called the Show Shopping Cart LWC, and the first thing I'm going to show you is the meta config file. To expose this LWC to Flow, I did two things. The first thing I did was I added the lightning _ flow screen target to the targets list. This is just like adding any target to the targets list. We've exposed lightning flow screen in this release. The second thing I've done is I have declared the set of inputs that I want Flow to be able to give this component and the set of outputs that I want Flow to be able to consume from this component. In this case, I have defined three sets of inputs, outputs. The first one is items, and as you can see here, this is a lightning flow screen targeted only data type, which is the Apex data type that we defined earlier. In particular, I've decided that it's going to be a set of cart items. I've also added a new Boolean input, which is to decide whether or not the shopping cart is amendable. Recall that in the first screen, we allowed that column quantity to be editable, and once the cart was finalized, we locked that column. And so we are exposing that functionality into Flow outside of the component so that we can actually use this component to power both of those screens, both of those experiences. The final property that I've exposed is cart size. And so this is just an integer that I've chosen to expose to sort of, constrain how large a shopping cart can be. And that was easy. So 4 lines there to expose the LWC to Flow. Let's actually look at the LWC. This is a super simple LWC that basically extends the Lightning data table element. It takes in as data the set of items that was provided by Flow. And so Flow is directly feeding in that set of Apex type objects into this LWC, and a set of columns. And finally, I have one on-cell change handler, which basically determines the logic that is executed when the end user updates a cell in the data table. Finally, let's look at the JavaScript controller. This JavaScript controller is pretty simple. I've exposed the properties that I want to be API accessible. I've defined the columns that I want this data table to have. And note, in the count column, I have left the editable attribute to be dynamic to this.isAmendable, which is what is being set by the component in Flow during runtime. And then finally, I've gone ahead and updated the handle update cart event. This is the change handler when a cell is changed, so that it updates the current cart or the proposed cart. And so those 3 classes, that cart item object definition, the Apex invocable action to actually fetch the cart, and the Lightning Web component to render the cart and to update the data inside of the cart. Within those 3, I think I wrote less than 100 lines of code, and using the other standard components that are available natively in Flow, or the standard components that are available in our developer documentation, I was able to craft this really engaging customer experience. In addition to that, what you can see here is I have brought the business logic of keeping the user on the amend cart screen until the cart has not been amended, right? You remember I was looping through that screen until I proceeded without changing the cart. I left that business logic inside of Flow Builder. And what this means now is that people who don't know how to code, if they want to change the business logic or they want to add more business-driven logic, like applying a VAT refund or applying some level of buyer loyalty discount, they can all do that inside of here without having to cause or affect a code change and a deployment. And so we hope this allows you to open up a lot of avenues to increase the way that you can respond to customer needs and the way that you need to refine the way that your experience is so that your end customers can get those improvements faster. And so that wraps up my demo. I'll hand it back to Kevin for the Q&A.
There was so much in there. I'm not even really sure where to start. I'm super excited about the scheduled flows. I know some orgs have hit their limits on scheduled Apex. And one of the things that always frustrated me when I was doing scheduled Apex was having to unschedule it in order to do a deploy. So my first question for you is actually one I just thought of. Do I have to unschedule scheduled flows in order to deploy?
No. However, you should always test in sandbox.
Well, yes. Yes.
Sorry, I know many of you out there are deploying your flows without testing them sandbox. Shame. You should do it first.
Okay.
But yes, you can.
Okay. One of the other questions we got about scheduled flows was, what is considered a transaction? And so they clarified that a little bit. Is it all the records in the Schedule 1 transaction, or is it similar to like a batch job and each record is its own transaction?
Actually, let me pull up an example, and I can show you actually what's going to happen. So in this demo org, I think I actually have a cool one, new hire email send. And so this is a very simple one that basically looks at a bunch of new hire records and sees the ones that are coming, like the ones who are starting in less than 2 weeks, and it sends them an email. And so this is a very simple one. And so if you look at the screen, you can see I've decided to set this flow to run on a batch of records. And so it's going to be, so we are going to perform a certain amount of batching logic to optimize for the number, basically optimize for the performance. Now, in terms of how we break up the transactions, I'm not comfortable enough to articulate it very well right now, but there will be developer documentation coming up. And in our flow webinar next week, I might have a better answer for you.
Okay, so stay tuned and read the docs. Okay. Another question people have put together is, we saw that you can put a Lightning Web component in a flow and an Aura component in a flow. Can you do the opposite? Can you put a flow in a Lightning Web component?
Unfortunately, in this release, you cannot put a flow directly into an LWC. The reason for this is that our flow runtime has been, for a long time, running in the Aura runtime. And so what we need to do before you can put a flow into an LWC is we need to refactor that runtime. And so right now, in fact, we might have engineers frantically doing that refactoring. And we hope to have that ready for you as soon as possible. And then you will be able to put flows into LWCs.
Okay. All right. So stay tuned. Okay. One of the other questions we've got coming in here is actually kind of interesting. Oftentimes your web objects are not canonical and flat like you had in your example. What happens if you've got nested types within your JSON, and how deep can those nested types be?
That's a great point. So for this demo, as you all remember, I actually chose to have my shopping cart object be completely flat just for simplicity. However, most web objects out there are definitely not flat. They're quite nested. And so we actually collaborated and cooperated with the Apex compiler team deeply for this feature. And the limitations that we have on Apex types are actually the same as in Apex. And so consider that in Apex classes, you can have inner classes one level deep. However, what you can do is you can also create another Apex class and have it as a property, refer to it as a property in an upper level Apex class. And so you can continue nesting your objects this way. We call this the transitive coverage, and that is unbounded. So you can represent basically any web object using that method.
So go hog wild, but don't go too wild.
Don't go too wild. Definitely, test these things for performance as well, and think about extensibility.
Okay. One of the questions we've gotten is, can you configure anything about the flow screen, like changing the color of the buttons or anything like that with this release?
Oh yeah, you could. So you could always do that, and you can do that in LWC now as well. And so let's go to, so I think in particular, the most customizable thing that we've seen people ask for are the navigation buttons inside of the flow. And so I think there are 5. Won't count as I name them out. There's a next, a back, a pause, a resume, and a finish navigation action. And inside of a screen, what you can do inside of the controller that you put in a screen is you can actually call an API, the Flow Engine API, to get the list of available next actions that can be taken from this screen. Then you can actually override and write your own custom navigation actions, including, you can have your own UI, but we have customers who actually add additional things, such as special customized validation that occurs on next, as well as just a whole bunch of other things that you can put into your JavaScript methods. So they're totally customizable.
Awesome. Could you speak a little bit more about how you use MuleSoft in this demo and how it all fits in?
Right. So we used MuleSoft in this demo to identify one of the pain points that a lot of customers have out there, which is they need to integrate to 50 or more backend systems, and those backend systems might have 10 or more canonical data models for the same real entity in real life, right? And so that becomes a management pain. And so we just chose MuleSoft here to sort of show how you can use MuleSoft as a layer in front of all those to abstract away the complexity of whatever technical debt you might have accrued in the past and converge on a single object model and expose it to Flow. And this actually means that as you add more integrations behind MuleSoft, you can keep that integration robust. So you don't have to refactor anything inside of Salesforce as you change your data model.
Super powerful. Super powerful. All right, with that, let's switch over to Badri, who's going to teach us all about real-time event monitoring with Shield.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Kevin. That was a great presentation. Before I spend the next few minutes talking about the second generation of event monitoring, let me give a brief overview of Salesforce Shield. Salesforce Shield is a trio of security tools that helps administrators and developers build security, compliance, governance right into their organization. Event monitoring with transaction security provides you detailed insights into the security, performance, and usage data of all of your Salesforce apps. In the second generation event monitoring, the events can be monitored in real time. We heard it loud and clear from our customers that the first generation product was giving them the data in a daily or in a hourly cadence. They gave us the feedback that they want the data right now so they can take actions right away. So we heard you, and here we are. The second generation product, the events can be monitored and acted upon in the real time. Also, in the Winter 20 release, we are adding support for what's called as an enhanced transaction security policies, wherein now administrators or developers can write policies on all standard and custom objects. Also, to improve the developer experience here, we introduced a new condition builder or a declarative UI for the admins that just want to use declarative UI to create policies. Or if you are a Power admin, you can also create complex use cases using Apex. The other advantage of the second generation product is that the data is stored in Salesforce for up to 6 months so that you can go back in time and audit your data. Also, the key difference between the first generation and the second generation product is that we have richer data sets that are being captured in the events in this product. Previously, for example, if a user were to run a report but never saved the report, that event was not captured. So you wouldn't know what data was accessed or exported via the unsaved reports. Whereas in this product, even if you have an unsaved report, we capture all the data that's being viewed at that given point in time by the user in the organization. Let me take a brief moment to thank you all for your incredible support and feedback. And this product was pretty much born out of all your support and encouragement that you've given us over the period of time. The 3 key components of the second generation product are that the events are published via standard platform events. The events can be subscribed to via specific event channels. And then the events at the same time are also stored as big objects in Salesforce. The events live for up to 6 months, so you can go back and audit them. Also, the other enhancement that I spoke about is the transaction security policy that will let you intercept the real-time actions and will act on it based on the policies that you created in your organization. The other key difference in the second generation product is that all the events, let it be API event, login event, report event, all of them share a common set of fields. So as an administrator, now you can stitch all your events from the time the user logged in till the time the user logged out. Let me just give you a quick overview of all the 14 events that we've added in this release. As you can clearly see, the events are broadly categorized into security-based themes. The first theme is authentication, in which now we let you monitor login, logout, and the identity verification attempts of the user. Under admin visibility, now we can also go ahead and view what the administrators are doing after they are logged in as a user and see what activities they are performing on the organization. The third theme is the object manipulation, where you can now see whenever an object is created, deleted, updated, or read from Classic or from Lightning UI, those events are captured instantaneously. Also, just to add a bonus, in the Lightning Aura event, we are capturing the page load times, or also effective page times. The next and the key theme here is the data leakage detection, or how to prevent data from being leaked in your organization. The three events that are supported there are API, list view, and report events. The fifth and the final event bucket is the mobile security. So now anytime anyone does any action in the Salesforce mobile app, those events can also be monitored from the Winter 20 release. There's a really nice set of a trail mix that have useful set of links available so that you can get started right away and get coding and try out these policies as we are releasing them in the Winter 20 release. All right, I'm done with the slides. Let's jump to the demo. All right, sorry for the...
Maybe the escape
All right.
button.
While you're trying to get the demo up there, let's talk about what's coming up. Let's talk about what we got coming up here in October for developers. In October, we're doing once a week, a month of live pair programming events called Codetober. You may have heard of these as Code Live before. It is Code Live, but we're doing the month of Codetober, and we've got all sorts of wonderful things coming up in October for that, and culminating in a candy tracker for Halloween. It's going to be fantastic. I'll be pair programming with members of the community. It'll be fun times for everyone. You get to count the typos, and I think you're ready with your demo.
Thank you, Kevin. Apologies for the glitch here, but now I'm ready to show you the amazing power of this real-time event monitoring. Let's take a customer who has a patents app in their organization, and they want to protect all their design patents so that those design patents are not leaked outside of the organization to their competitors. So here we have a list of design patents that the organization has deemed it to be sensitive. And the use case for this customer is that they want to be able to prevent any kind of reports from being run on the set of design patents. So let's go ahead and see how you will be able to block this action from being happening in your organization. So in the setup tree, we introduce what's called as transaction security policy. So once you find them, you should be able to go and create a policy. For the purpose of this demo, I've created a sample policy here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this is a simple condition builder policy because the use case is very simple, that I just want to block a report that's being run on patents. So let me go quickly show you what the policy looks like. So this is a simple declarative UI policy where I'm saying on the report event, block anything that matches this report name. And then block the report, send me an email and in-app notification when the report is being run. Let's go ahead and enable this policy. Now that the policy is enabled, let's go ahead and run this report and see what happens. When the report is run, you can see that there's an error thrown to the user saying, you are not allowed to view this report, contact your system administrator. But at the same time, we also captured this event and published it as a standard platform event and also stored this event in the big object. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So the big object is called as a report event. So when you go and query the report event, it pulls you back this set of information. Now you can clearly see the report was run from Lightning UI, and this is the name of the report that was run, and the outcome was that a security policy was enforced and the action was blocked. At the same time, let's also go ahead and take a look at what came in through the report event stream channel. The event got published right away, and then the event has, like I mentioned before, has the same set of fields that are available in the object that's stored in the big object and the object that are streamed here. Now let's go back, switch gears, and take a look at another complex use case. So this is the HR app where the customer wants to prevent the users from being able to look up the cases that are filed against them in the organization. So here we have the cases object and a list of cases filed here. And the use case here is that they want to prevent any kind of API queries from being run on this cases object, specifically looking at the submitted by field in the object. So there is a submitted by field which the organization has deemed it to be sensitive. Now, working together with another feature called as data classification, you now have the ability or the power to mark fields as confidential or sensitive in every single object that's supported in this feature. So here I am in the case object. I said the submitted by field is critical to my organization, so I want to mark it confidential. So anytime a user runs a query on a case object pulling in the submitted by field, go ahead and block them. Because this is a complex policy, we are going to use Apex to build that policy. In the second generation product, you have to implement this new interface called as transaction security.event condition. And all we are doing here is query the list of confidential fields on the given object and then match them against what's being run currently by the user. And if there's a match, go ahead and return true and block the action from being happening in your organization. So let's go ahead and try to query that object, the HR case object. So I'm trying to pull in the submitted by field, assigned by field on the cases object. So when I query this, on the right-hand side, you can see that it gave you an error message saying you are not authorized to perform this operation. At the same time, like I mentioned before, the event is published in the API event stream channel, and it has the same common set of fields like the login key, session key, user ID, and the policy outcome that block the action from happening in your organization. As you can clearly see, this gives you more control over your data. So I would please advocate to be responsible and write tests and test out these policies in your sandbox or in your developer organizations before deploying them to production. This concludes my part of the demo. Thanks, Kevin. Take it away.
Padre, that looks very powerful. And again, I think you're right there. It's a very powerful tool, but also because of its power, we need to test it pretty extensively. We've got some other questions that have come in about this. The first one is actually kind of interesting. I hadn't thought about this. They're pointing out that platform events have a certain set of limits associated with them between published events and things that they can be pushed to. Do the streaming events, or the platform events used by real-time streaming monitoring impact those limits, or are they a separate set of limits?
Yeah, they are not subjected to the same limits as the platform events. These events are whitelisted, so they are subjected to the service production limits, but there aren't specific limits as such.
Okay, that's cool. Are there any kind of analytics events that you can use, or analytics apps events that you can use to monitor these?
In the Winter 20 release, we are releasing this as an API first product. So going forward in the roadmap, we do have plans to support visualization on the real-time events.
Okay. Are there any kinds of performance impacts from enabling these?
That's a great question. Yes, there are. If you don't have a policy, the events are stored and streamed asynchronously, so there's no impact to you. But if you have a security policy, that's happening in real time, so it's going to intercept the action. So if you have a runaway policy, we do have limits that are going to be forcing the policy to close. So you have to be really careful on what kind of security policies that you want to write when these actions are happening.
And is there any kind of like stacking effect where if you have multiple security policies on the same objects that has a deeper performance impact? Or how does that work if you have multiple policies?
If you have multiple policies on the same event, we advocate that test them, and then see if we can optimize them to be on the same event, on one policy, because it's going to run one after the other and going to keep the users from preventing an action from happening. And you can see how frustrated the users will be if they know that they are being monitored.
So maybe best practice would be to say one policy per event?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And the other thing somebody's pointing out here is that as a user of version 1 of this product, is there a way to migrate their existing mass of policies to the new enhanced versions?
Yes, that's also another good question. This product has been out there, the first generation, for the last 2-3 years. So we are publishing a migration guide to help customers migrate from their first generation to the second generation of policies. We walk you through every example that you could have and walk you through on how easily you can migrate them to this policy. The caveat here is that when you're trying this in your organization, you have to disable the first generation policy and then enable the second generation one.
So you can only have one generation per event active.
Right, exactly.
Take your first generation, mirror it into the second generation through the migration workbook and such, and then deactivate the first generation, turn on the second generation.
Perfect, yes.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, I think that's a great introduction to that. I think it's going to be very powerful, especially the whole like leaking patents information or hiding, the HR things. Those are great demos. With that, I think we're gonna. I want to draw your attention back to the Code Live thing. I talked to you a little bit about what Code Live is. I didn't tell you how to join us. Part of doing a live stream is that you get to join in on us and comment, tweet, heckle, enjoy, have fun with us, learn a little bit. And in order to do that, you've got to sign up so that we can give you the information about how to join the stream. On the slide, you'll see the sforce.co/codelive. You can go there to sign up, see what all the topics are going to be, who the guest speakers are going to be. It's going to be a good time next month. And I also want to draw your attention to the Learn More campaign. If you go to sforce.co/learnmore, you'll find that we have trail mixes for both admins and developers. And these trail mixes are actually part of a Trailhead quest. And as you do the quest, as you succeed and complete the quest, a couple of things are going to happen. One, it's going to be very fulfilling and be like, yeah, look at all this stuff I learned. But also, we're going to donate to help kids build robots. So for everybody who completes the quest, we're going to donate to helping kids build robots. And I can only imagine what kids are going to come up with in terms of like building robots. I'm envisioning something like a cross between the Terminator and Big Hero 6. So that'll be very exciting. With that, let's go around and see if anybody's got any last comments. Badri, you want to kick us off? Anything you want to say about maybe what's coming or tease us a little bit?
Sure. There's more coming up in the real-time event monitoring, so stay tuned. There are going to be more security events added. It's going to make you feel like the boss of your organization, of your data.
The boss. All right. Like a boss. Like a boss. Tim?
Thanks. So here on Flow, we are committed to not just making it easy to develop, but also we're going to be making a lot of investments into making it easy to debug, test, and maintain your applications. And so, we are monitoring all the channels that you all provide feedback and critique and praise. And so we'll be in touch and stay in touch with the feedback.
All right. Grace?
We've got a lot of things in the pipeline, so just make sure that you come and check us out at Dreamforce. Get excited.
Dreamforce. Yes, we look forward to seeing you at Dreamforce. And remember, as the next release comes up, there'll be another one of these release readiness webinars, and you can learn all more about it there as you tune in. With that, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us on the broadcast. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. Bye-bye. All right.